You think you are free. You are sincerely convinced that your ironclad principles, your stubbornness, your ability to stand your ground are your greatest strengths. You are deeply mistaken. In nature, the mightiest oak that proudly refuses to bow to the wind is the first to break when a real hurricane comes. Bamboo survives. Grass survives. Those you are used to considering weak survive because they know how to bend. We have all heard this phrase 1,000 times. Be water, my friend. It has become a cheap cliche, a caption for a gym selfie, a print on a cheap t-shirt. We took the most dangerous, most effective survival strategy of the 20th century and turned it into empty noise, into a phrase from a fortune cookie. But what if I told you that the moment Bruce Lee spoke those words, he wasn't talking about fighting at all? He wasn't giving advice on how to defeat an opponent in the ring or how to land a beautiful kick for the camera. He was describing an algorithm for waging war against reality itself. Look at an ordinary glass of water sitting on a table. At first glance, it is the most harmless, trivial thing in the world. Water has no shape, no color, no aggression. It seems passive, weak, pliable, a substance that can be drunk, poured out, or forgotten. But this is the greatest illusion your brain creates, accustomed to thinking in categories of solid objects. Give this weak water enough pressure, focus it through a narrow nozzle, and it will slice through alloy steel 10 centimeters thick, faster and cleaner than an industrial laser. Water is the only matter on Earth that cannot be broken because it refuses to be solid. It does not enter into conflict with the hammer. It flows around it. And this is where the secret lies that most people miss, dooming themselves to a life full of stress and defeat. Most of you listening to me right now are stones. You are rigid. You have rigid beliefs about how the world should look. You have rigid schedules, rigid career expectations, rigid requirements for a partner. And that is precisely why you feel broken. That is why every crisis, whether a sudden layoff, a betrayal by a loved one, or a market crash, leaves cracks in you that don't heal for years. You try to stop a tsunami of chaos by building a wall out of your ego, but the wall always loses. Water always finds a way. The modern world changes at such speed that any rigid structure becomes obsolete before it is even finished. By the end of this video, you will understand why your vaunted hardness actually makes you poor, unhappy, and vulnerable. You will see that Bruce Lee was not just an actor kicking his legs, but a philosopher who hacked the code of adaptation in a world where stability no longer exists. But before we dive into the abyss of his mind, remember the image of that glass of water. While the water is inside, it seems like a prisoner. It is forced to take the shape of the vessel, to submit to its boundaries. But this is a trap for the observer. The water is not locked up. It is waiting. And the moment the glass cracks, and believe me, under the pressure of life, the glass will eventually crack for every one of us. The water will not disappear or shatter. It will burst out, and this flow can either save you or drown you. The choice is yours. But first, you must admit a painful truth. Everything you were taught about strength is a lie. To understand a philosophy capable of saving your psyche in the 21st century, you must first touch the open wound from which it was born. You must erase from your memory the image of Bruce Lee as a calm, smiling guru in a yellow suit. That is a marketing lie. The real Bruce Lee of the 1950s was a walking disaster, a bundle of exposed nerves and uncontrolled aggression. Imagine Hong Kong at that time, dirty, dangerous, divided between British colonizers and brutal street gangs. And in the center of this chaos was a teenager who carried chains and brass knuckles in his pocket, not prayer beads. Bruce wasn't water. He was fire, an uncontrolled blaze consuming the oxygen around him. He earned the nickname Never Sit Still, and that was putting it mildly. He got into rooftop fights, challenged the sons of triads, and solved every problem. The only way he knew how, a head-on attack. His strategy was absolute rigidity. If the world pushed him, he pushed back with double the force. But this strategy, as he soon found out, had a fatal flaw. When you behave like glass, any blow you fail to block doesn't just wound you, it shatters you into pieces. His teacher, the legendary Ip Man, watched this self-destruction with sadness. He saw that his best student possessed phenomenal technique, but his mind was shackled. Bruce tried to break through walls with his head that could simply be bypassed. And then Ip Man did something that seemed like betrayal to Bruce. He didn't give him the secret technique of the death touch. He kicked him out. "Go home," the master said, "and don't come back until you understand the nature of softness." For the young fighter's ego, this was worse than a slap in the face. It was exile. Bruce found himself in isolation. For a week, he wandered the city, seething with anger and confusion. How can softness defeat strength? It seemed absurd, contradicting all his experience of survival on the streets. In a fit of despair, he took a boat and rowed out into Hong Kong harbor to be alone with his demons. He lay on the bottom of the boat, looking at the sky, feeling the anger pulsing in his temples. He needed to destroy something, to vent this energy. He leaned over the side, and with all his might, putting all his hatred and frustration into it, punched the water. And in that moment, time stopped for him. What happened next rewrote the neural pathways in his brain. The water didn't crack. It didn't break his knuckles. It offered no resistance. At the moment of impact, it obediently parted, letting his fist deep inside, but as soon as he tried to pull his hand back, the water instantly closed around it. It accepted the blow, absorbed its energy, and remained unharmed. Bruce tried to grab it. It slipped through his fingers. He tried to strike again. It adapted again. For the first time in his life, he saw an opponent before him that could not be destroyed by force. The water was soft, but in its softness, it possessed absolute invulnerability. In that second, staring at the dark surface of the harbor, Bruce realized his fundamental mistake. He was trying to be a rock in an ocean of chaos. And a rock, no matter how hard, eventually turns to sand under the pounding of waves. To survive, he had to stop being the object that gets hit. He had to become the element itself. This epiphany became the point of no return. The boy looking for a fight died in that boat, and a philosopher was born who understood how to defeat reality itself. But he didn't yet know that fate was preparing a test for him, where philosophy alone would not be enough. Let's fast forward to the shining but ruthless Hollywood of the late 60s. Bruce Lee is no longer a street fighter. He's an ambitious visionary, trying to sell studio bosses something revolutionary, the idea of a philosophical action series called The Warrior. He pours his soul into this project, writes the script, develops the choreography, but he makes the classic mistake of an idealist. He believes that talent opens all doors. Reality quickly reminds him that Hollywood is not a meritocracy, but a cynical machine running on stereotypes. Producers smile at him, shake his hand, take his concept, and then tell him to his face a phrase that could destroy anyone. The American audience is not ready to see a Chinese man in the lead role. And you think that's rock bottom? No. That was just the beginning of the fall. The studio takes Bruce's idea, renames it the series Kung Fu, and hires David Carradine for the lead role, a white actor who had never thrown a real kick in his life. It was a public humiliation, a stolen dream, distorted beyond recognition. At this moment, any stone, a person with a rigid ego and a sense of justice, would have shattered. He would have spent years on lawsuits, drunk himself to death out of resentment, or simply vanished, cursing racism. Bruce was furious. He was devastated. But this is where the water philosophy underwent its first crash test in the real world of business. However, fate, as if deciding to test his theory to the limit, dealt another blow, this time physical. On August 13th, 1970. Trying to drown out mental pain with physical exertion, Bruce severely damages his fifth lumbar vertebra and tears the ligaments of his back during training. The doctor's verdict sounds like a funeral bell. Mr. Lee, you may be able to walk, but forget about martial arts forever. Imagine this level of pressure. You are broke. Your idea was stolen. Your body, your only tool for earning and self-expression, is broken. You are bedridden, staring at the ceiling in a rented apartment, while on the TV screen, a white guy plays your role. Most people in such a situation harden. They become bitter, resentful, frozen in the victim pose. But Bruce remembered the lesson in the boat. If water meets a dam, it doesn't argue with it. It accumulates. It waits. And while he lay motionless for 6 months, he didn't waste energy on self-pity. He transformed his mind. He began to write. He began to develop his own fighting philosophy, Jeet Kune Do. Instead of banging his head against the closed door of Hollywood, he decided to become water and flow around the obstacle. If America doesn't want him, he won't beg. He will execute a strategic maneuver no one could have foreseen. He turned 180 degrees, scraped together his last pennies, and flew back to Hong Kong, the place he had once left. It wasn't a flight. It was changing the river's course. He decided to create his own industry, his own rules of the game, in a territory where his skin color was an advantage, not an obstacle. He used the energy of rejection, the energy of back pain, and the energy of a stolen dream as fuel for a jet-fueled start. And what happened next? It's like the effect of a compressed spring or a hydraulic press. The water they tried to lock in a tight vessel found a microscopic crack and burst out with such force that it swept away the dam itself. His first Hong Kong film, The Big Boss, didn't just become a hit. It caused a cultural tsunami. Bruce Lee turned from a Hollywood outcast into an Asian box office god overnight. But the most ironic and sweet part of this story is how Hollywood reacted. The very people who said, "We don't need you," suddenly realized they had missed a gold mine. But now Bruce was returning to America, not as a supplicant with an outstretched hand. He was returning as a force of nature, with whom it was impossible to negotiate on old terms. He showed that adaptation is not conformity. It is the highest form of dominance. But many still confuse flexibility with weakness, and that is a fatal mistake for which one has to pay. Water takes the shape of the cup. You've heard this phrase a million times. It has become so hackneyed that it has lost its flavor. But have you ever wondered why water does this? Do you sincerely believe it is an act of submission? An act of humility before the shape of the vessel? This is the greatest lie sold to you by motivational speakers and pop culture. Bruce Lee never taught us to be passive. He taught us the art of infiltration. Water fills the void, not to stay there forever and become comfortable. It does so to study the structure from the inside, find microscopic cracks, and occupy every available millimeter of the opponent's space. And here lies the plot twist that changes the entire understanding of this philosophy. Do you know what water does when it is locked in a closed, rigid space and external pressure or temperature changes? It changes its state of matter. It turns into ice. It expands. And in that moment, with a quiet, almost inaudible sound, it tears apart the strongest alloy steel, the hardest granite, the most expensive porcelain cup from the inside. The be water philosophy is not about softness. It is about the delayed, inevitable destruction of an obstacle by its own walls. It is the strategy of the Trojan horse, raised to the absolute of physics. Now I want you to stop. Right now. I want you to turn off the noise in your head and honestly look in the mirror. Ask yourself, where exactly in your life are you acting like a stone right now? Remember that problem that makes you wake up in a cold sweat at 3 a.m. Your debts tightening the noose around your neck? Your marriage bursting at the seams, but you're afraid to admit it? Your boss wiping his feet on you? What do you do in response? You clench your teeth. You tense your muscles to the point of spasms. You scream about the injustice of the world. You try to push through the situation with willpower, ramming your horns against the wall. You are a stone praying for the hammer of fate to stop striking. But I have bad news for you. The hammer won't stop. Reality doesn't care about your resilience. And as long as you remain a stone, every blow will chip pieces off you until nothing remains of your personality, your health, and your nerves but fine dust. You think control is gripping the steering wheel of your life with two hands until your knuckles turn white. Bruce Lee realized that this is an illusion of control that leads to neuroses. True power is the ability to take your hands off the wheel and become the road itself. Sounds like madness? Perhaps. But look at the graveyard of history. Companies that held rigidly to their principles and old business models, Kodak, Nokia, Blockbuster, where are they now? They were solid. They were confident in their righteousness, and they are dead. But those who became water, those who allowed the market to dictate the form, those who flowed into digital, into services, into new niches, they rule the world. Bruce Lee's philosophy is not Zen Buddhism for hippies meditating on the sunset. It is the ruthless pragmatism of a predator. It is the skill to kill your ego the moment it starts interfering with survival. Most people burn out from heart attacks at 40 precisely because their ego is too heavy and cumbersome to swim with the current of change. They drown under the weight of their own self-importance, trying to prove to the world that they are right. But the paradox is this: only when you completely lose your rigid form do you become absolutely invulnerable to a blow. How can you break what isn't there? How can you knock out someone who has already become part of your attack? You thought the goal was to defeat the enemy. But Bruce realized that the highest goal is to make the enemy fight himself while you simply flow through him, remaining untouched. Remember that ordinary glass of water we mentally placed on the table at the very beginning of this story? I asked you to remember it because it hides the finale of the puzzle Bruce Lee left us as a legacy. Look at it again, but now with different eyes. While the water is inside the glass, it seems calm and safe, but in reality, it is a prisoner. It is limited by invisible walls. It is forced to serve the shape of the vessel. It is deprived of its true nature, freedom of movement. The glass is your comfort zone, your job title, your social status, the rigid mask you wear every day. You think the glass protects the water, but in reality, it isolates it from the ocean. Now imagine someone's hand abruptly tips over this glass. The glass shatters. The water spills onto the floor. In the first second, it looks like a catastrophe, like a mess, like a loss. But what actually happens to the water? The moment the form is destroyed, the water is liberated. It soaks into the earth. It evaporates under the sun's rays. It becomes a cloud, rain, a river, and ultimately returns to the world ocean. Having lost its form, it gained immortality. Bruce Lee died at the age of 32. That is a tragic medical fact. But his philosophy did what no emperor or general could manage. It cheated time. Bruce refused to be fixed in one form. Who was he? An actor, a philosopher, a fighter, a Hong Kong cha-cha champion, a writer. He was all of these and none of them simultaneously. He was a flow of energy that changed shape depending on the circumstances. That is why, half a century after his death, we are still talking about him, while the names of his critics and competitors have been ground into the dust of history. He wasn't a statue that could be destroyed. He was an idea that cannot be killed. Look at the world around you right now. We live in an era where reality changes faster than we can blink. Artificial intelligence takes away professions that were considered eternal in a matter of months. Economic giants collapse overnight. Political systems are bursting at the seams. In this new world, being a solid specialist with a narrow set of skills, being a solid father who knows only one method of upbringing, or a solid leader who doesn't hear others, is a direct path to evolutionary extinction. Darwin was right, but Bruce Lee refined his formula. It is not the strongest who survives, nor even the smartest. The one who survives is the one who knows how to become water, the one who can spill through the fingers of change and reassemble in a new form. But here is a question that gives me no peace, and which I want to leave you with like a splinter in your brain. This absolute adaptation comes with a price that motivational speakers are silent about. If you become water, if you perfectly take the shape of any vessel life throws you into, does anything solid remain inside you that you can call yourself? Is total adaptation not a form of spiritual suicide, where personality dissolves into efficiency? Where is the line between wise flexibility and the loss of one's own backbone? Who was Bruce Lee at the end of his journey? A man who found the absolute truth, or a man who got so carried away dissolving boundaries that he lost himself in the endless pursuit of perfection? This is not a rhetorical question. How you live tomorrow depends on your answer. Write in the comments. Is adaptation the ultimate power, or a path to losing one's soul? The battle of opinions starts there.